It started the night she came home with her sweater on inside out and didn't realize it until halfway through dinner. That was the moment it clicked. I didn't say anything at first. I just sat across from her at the table, watching her twirl pasta around her fork with this absent look in her eyes, completely unaware that the tag from her black sweater was sticking out near her collarbone. It was one of those little details that shouldn't mean anything, but suddenly meant everything. Nicole was a perfectionist, always had been, the type to fix her lipstick with a napkin after every glass of wine, the type to smooth her dress down before leaving the bathroom. Inside-out clothes weren't her thing. They just weren't. So I stared at it. And she kept talking about her new client, a 70-year-old marathon runner, supposedly. And the more she talked, the more I felt like she was trying too hard to sound normal. My food went cold while I kept listening, waiting to see if she'd catch the mistake herself, waiting for something in her tone to align with the truth. When she finally looked up and caught me watching her, she tilted her head and smiled like nothing was wrong. "What?" she asked, and I knew right then I wasn't supposed to notice the sweater. I wasn't supposed to be paying that much attention. I was supposed to eat my dinner, nod along, maybe ask her how her client's knees were holding up, and then put on a movie after we cleared the plates. But something about the way she smiled, it didn't reach her eyes. It was the kind of smile you give a stranger at the grocery store, not your husband of 6 years. So I smiled back, and I said, "Nothing. You just look tired." She laughed a little too loudly and said, "Yeah, I didn't sleep much last night," and then immediately reached for her wine like she was trying to drown the sentence before it made contact with the table. I didn't confront her that night. I needed something more than a sweater and a bad excuse. So I waited until she went to bed and I walked around the house alone, looking for something I didn't even know how to define yet. She was already snoring lightly when I stood in the laundry room and noticed the faint scent of cologne that didn't belong to either of us. It wasn't strong. It was one of those scents you only catch when you're not trying to smell it, like something clinging to the air after the person is long gone. It smelled like cedarwood and something faintly spicy, and I knew for a fact it wasn't from any bottle I kept in our bathroom. I leaned in closer to the clothes piled in the laundry basket, and that's when I saw it. A small red thread clinging to one of her leggings. It wasn't from anything she owned. It looked like it belonged to a fancy dress shirt, the kind men wear when they want to impress. That was my second breadcrumb. The third came 3 days later, and it's what sealed everything for me. We were invited to a neighbor's barbecue, one of those weekend things where the same people always show up with the same drinks and talk about the same crap. House prices, gym memberships, renovations they'll never finish. I wasn't in the mood, but Nicole insisted, said it would be good for us. She wore her hair up that night, which she rarely did, and this little silver necklace I hadn't seen in a while. It was subtle, but I noticed the clasp was facing forward, hanging just under her throat, and when I leaned in to fix it for her, she instinctively pulled away, like I had touched something raw. That reaction, that flinch, it wasn't about the necklace. It was about the fact that I had reached for her, and she wasn't ready for that. At the party, she was all charm and laughter, joking with everyone like nothing in the world was wrong. I stayed quiet most of the time, sipping beer and watching her float around like a guest instead of my wife. Then I saw it. When she thought I wasn't looking, she walked over to the side of the yard, where one of our neighbors, Jeff, stood smoking. They talked quietly, too quietly. I watched her lean in, touch his arm, laugh at something he said while looking up through her lashes. It was a short exchange, probably no more than a minute or two, but the way she touched his elbow before walking away made my stomach twist. She only did that when she was flirting. She used to do that to me. Back home, I waited until she was in the shower. I walked into the garage under the pretense of grabbing the extra bag of dog food, but I was looking for something else. Anything. That's when I saw it. A wine glass with lipstick smudged on the rim sitting on the old workbench next to 2 folding chairs. We never drank in the garage. We never sat in the garage. There was no reason for those to be there unless someone had made a reason. The glass was next to a lighter I didn't recognize and a small pack of mints she never carried. It didn't take a genius to put the pieces together. I didn't say anything that night either. I crawled into bed next to her and stared at the ceiling, thinking about the moment I would finally confront her, trying to guess which lie she'd go with first. And as I listened to her soft breathing, I felt a coldness settle in my chest that I hadn't felt before. It wasn't heartbreak, not yet. It was the slow, suffocating weight of knowing your world is about to fall apart, and being completely powerless to stop it. She made it too easy for me, honestly. That Saturday morning, she said she was going to help her friend Lisa move. I nodded like I always did, pretended to sip my coffee even though it had gone cold 15 minutes earlier. She walked around the kitchen like she was late for something more important than just moving boxes, opening and closing drawers, pretending to look for her sunglasses until she found them in her purse, right on top. I watched her from the living room without saying a word, letting her run through her little script like it was a play she'd rehearsed too many times. She kissed me goodbye, too quick for someone about to spend an entire day lifting furniture, and told me not to wait up. I smiled and said, "Okay, take care," and watched her walk out the door without looking back once. An hour later, I was parked 2 blocks from Lisa's apartment building, the one Nicole had named so casually, assuming I'd never verify it. I sat in the car with the engine off and my seat reclined, not because I was trying to hide, but because I needed to breathe without anyone watching. 30 minutes passed, then an hour, then 2. I didn't see Nicole, not once. No one was moving anything in or out of that building. Lisa wasn't even home. Her car was gone, the windows of her unit were dark, and the only person who walked out during that entire time was a teenager with a skateboard and a pizza box. I knew, right then, without any doubts left in me, that Nicole had lied to my face and expected me to just sit at home while she did whatever, or whoever, she was doing behind my back. I drove straight to the only other place that made sense. Jeff's. His car was parked out front, nothing unusual about that. But the blinds in his living room were tilted just enough to block the inside view, and that had never been the case before. The weird part wasn't that I couldn't see in, it was that I'd never needed to until now. I sat across the street in the neighbor's driveway, pretending to scroll my phone, and waited. For nearly 30 minutes, nothing happened. No one came out. No one went in. Then it happened. Nicole walked out of the front door with her sweater tied around her waist, her hair pulled back in a ponytail she didn't leave the house with, and she was holding a to-go cup of coffee. Jeff followed right behind her, laughing at something she said, wearing a shirt I'd never seen before and cargo shorts like he was heading to the beach. They didn't look at each other like people who just had a friendly visit. They looked relaxed, close, like this was normal for them, like it had been happening for a while. I didn't move. I just watched her walk to her car and get in like this was any other Saturday. She didn't check her phone once, didn't even glance around to see if anyone might be watching. She drove off toward the main road, and I followed from a distance. Not because I needed more proof, but because I didn't know what else to do. I needed to see how far she'd go with it, how long she'd pretend everything was fine. I followed her halfway across town, all the way to the Target on Jefferson. She walked in like nothing had happened, picked up a cart, and started shopping. I waited outside in the car, letting the pieces fall together in my head. That night, I didn't say a word. She came home, dropped 2 plastic bags on the kitchen counter, and said Lisa was eternally grateful for the help. I said, "Cool, did you eat?" She said, "Yeah. Jeff picked up lunch for everyone." I asked what she had. She said burgers. I asked from where. She said some new place by the park, couldn't remember the name. I said, "Next time bring me something." And she smiled, told me I should have come, then walked into the bathroom and turned on the shower. I waited until the water started running before I walked into the garage. The wine glasses were gone from the workbench. Every time before, I'd left them there, untouched, like I was pretending they didn't mean anything. But now they were gone, like she was cleaning up, covering tracks, maybe even preparing for me to start asking questions. I checked the small drawer under the workbench where we kept random stuff: batteries, candles, old keys. Her old perfume bottle was in there, the one I bought her 2 birthdays ago. It had been empty for months, and she swore she'd thrown it away. But here it was, freshly used, the cap still warm in my hand, and the scent unmistakable. I went back inside and sat at the table while she hummed in the shower. I didn't know what part of me wanted to walk in there and end it all right then, and what part wanted to wait just one more day. Maybe I needed to see how far she'd go. Maybe I wanted to catch her in a lie so bold that even she couldn't deny it anymore. Or maybe I just wanted her to confess without me having to drag it out of her. But the next day was going to be different. I'd already made the call. Lisa and I had coffee plans the next morning, and Lisa, sweet, naive Lisa, had no idea what Nicole had dragged her name into. But she was going to find out. And so was Nicole. When I met Lisa at that coffee place the next morning, she greeted me with a hug like nothing strange had happened. smiling like we were old friends catching up instead of participants in a silent war I hadn't told her about yet. We sat at a small table near the window, and she immediately started talking about work, how her new manager was incompetent, and how she was thinking about quitting. I let her talk, nodding at the right times, pretending I wasn't only there to drop a bomb on her reality. I waited until the coffee came before I said anything that might make her uncomfortable. Once she finished complaining about her boss, I leaned forward slightly and said, "Hey, I just need to ask you something kind of weird." Lisa blinked a couple of times, clearly thrown off. "Sure, what's up?" I kept my eyes on hers, not wanting her to shift away or look for an exit. "Nicole said she spent all of yesterday helping you move, that you two spent most of the day together." Her eyebrows pulled together, confused. "What? No, I was in San Diego all weekend. My cousin's baby shower. I thought she knew that. I posted about it all over Instagram." I didn't say anything right away. I just sat there watching her as the silence stretched between us. It took her a second longer before her face started to change. "Wait, she told you she was with me?" I nodded, and for a moment, she didn't know what to say. She looked down at her coffee, then back up at me. "I don't get it. Why would she?" And then her mouth froze half open. She knew. It didn't take a genius to put two and two together. Nicole had used her as an alibi, and Lisa had just realized she was part of something she didn't agree to. "I didn't mean to drag you into this," I said quietly, not wanting the other tables to hear. "But I had to know. She lied about where she was, and it wasn't even a clever lie. She just assumed I wouldn't ask you." Lisa leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and looked toward the street. I could tell she was piecing things together just like I had days before. She took a deep breath before speaking. "You think she's cheating?" she said, not as a question, more like a fact she had already accepted. I nodded again. "No, I know." She didn't ask how I knew, which told me she probably already suspected something herself. Instead, she stared at her coffee like it might give her an answer she couldn't find on her own. "Well, that's just fantastic," she muttered. "She used me as a cover while she's doing whatever she's doing." "With Jeff?" I said flatly, watching her reaction. I saw them together. Lisa's head jerked back toward me like I'd slapped her. "Wait, Jeff? Our Jeff? The guy from the barbecue?" "Yeah, that Jeff. Oh my God." She pressed her hands against her forehead, rubbing her temples like the information physically hurt. "I mean, okay, they've always been flirty, but I didn't think it was real. I thought she was just playing around. I even told her to chill out once because she was touching his arm so much. I didn't need her validation, but hearing that made everything settle a little more heavily in my chest. Nicole hadn't just lied to me. She had turned her own friends into props to keep her act going. Lisa looked genuinely upset, not for me, but because she'd been used in a lie she didn't agree to. After a long pause, she leaned in and asked, "What are you going to do?" I didn't answer right away. The truth was, I didn't know yet. I hadn't decided if I wanted to burn the whole thing down or if I wanted her to feel the way I had felt, silent, helpless, trapped under a truth she didn't want to face. But I was getting there. "I'm going to let her keep lying for a little longer," I said eventually. "I want to see how far she'll go. I've already set some things up. Cameras, audio in the garage and kitchen. If she's still stupid enough to use the house, I'll have everything." Lisa didn't even try to hide how shocked she was. "Jesus, you're serious?" I looked her dead in the eye. "I'm done playing dumb. I want the truth. And if she won't give it to me, I'll take it." Lisa pushed her coffee away and nodded slowly. "You know, I hope you make her regret it. She always acted like you were some kind of background character in her life. But you've always been better than her." I didn't need the compliment, but I appreciated it. It was the first time someone had looked at me and said I wasn't the one to blame for what was happening. When I got home later that day, Nicole was already back, sitting on the couch with her legs tucked under her, flipping through some nonsense reality show with a bowl of popcorn she didn't even seem interested in. She looked up when I walked in and smiled like she had nothing to hide. "How was your day?" she asked. "Uneventful," I said, walking past her to the kitchen, pretending I didn't already know she was full of shit. "Just coffee with Lisa." Her face didn't even twitch. That told me everything I needed to know. She didn't think Lisa would ever talk. She believed she had everything under control. She was wrong. The next Friday night, I finally got what I had been waiting for. I had installed a small audio recorder under the workbench in the garage, the one I knew she sometimes used as her little hideout spot. If anything was going to happen in that house while I wasn't around, It would happen there. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, not even Lisa. I didn't need anyone else involved. This wasn't a shared mission. This was personal. That afternoon, I told Nicole I had a last-minute meeting with a client across town and wouldn't be back until late. She barely looked up from her phone and just said, "No problem," like she was relieved I'd be gone. I left around 6, drove to a diner on the other side of the city, parked in a dark corner of the lot, and waited. Around 7:30, I checked the camera feed from my phone. Nothing in the kitchen, nothing at the front door, nothing in the backyard, but the garage door cam was down. I checked again, still offline. That was the moment I knew. She had disconnected the power to the outlet it was tied to. She had planned ahead. At 10:30, I drove back slowly, parked 3 blocks away, and walked the rest. The neighborhood was quiet. Most people were inside or asleep, porch lights on, the occasional dog barking somewhere in the distance. I slipped in through the side gate, unlocked the garage manually from the outside, and stood there in the dark for a few seconds. Everything looked the same, but something about it felt different. Like someone had been there and gone, careful to cover their tracks, but not careful enough. The wine glasses were gone again. A faint scent lingered in the air. Nicole's perfume mixed with something else, something stronger, something that didn't belong to our house. I didn't need to guess. I already knew. The next morning, I didn't say anything. I waited until she left for a run, then grabbed the recorder and plugged it into my laptop. I sat at the kitchen table, hit play, and listened. For the first 5 minutes, there was nothing but silence and the occasional sound of creaking wood or distant cars. Then voices. Her voice. His voice. They were close. Laughing. Whispering. Talking like 2 people who had done this before. There was no discussion, no argument, no tension. Just comfort. Familiarity. Then the sounds I hoped I wouldn't hear, but expected. I sat through the whole thing, not because I needed the details, but because I wanted the truth burned into my memory. I wanted to know exactly what she was willing to risk just to feel something outside this marriage. When she came home, she looked refreshed. She said her run helped her clear her head. I nodded, said, "That's good," and she went upstairs to shower. I stood in the living room, staring at the spot where she had just been, wondering how someone could walk through the door like that after doing what she did. No guilt, no hesitation, just a casual shift back into our life. I didn't follow her upstairs. I went out to the garage, cleaned up the area, and placed everything back exactly as she had left it. I wasn't going to confront her yet. Not like that. I wanted her to think she was winning. That night, I made her favorite dinner. Set the table, poured wine, lit candles. Everything I knew she'd interpret as me trying to fix what she had no intention of saving. She looked surprised when she came downstairs. Asked if we were celebrating something. "Just us," I said, handing her a glass. She hesitated, then smiled. "That's sweet. You've been different lately." "Different how?" "I don't know," she said. "More distant, but not in a bad way. More thoughtful." I smiled and nodded. She clinked her glass with mine, took a sip, and sat down. We talked about normal things, her clients, my work, weekend plans. She told me Lisa had been weird lately, not replying to her texts. I said maybe Lisa was just busy, and she agreed without questioning it. She was good at lying. Too good. And now, so was I? The next day, I called Jeff. I didn't give him a warning or a polite intro. I called him while I was walking around the backyard, put him on speaker, and said, "I know about you and Nicole." There was silence on the other end. No shock, no panic, just silence. "I don't know what you're talking about," he finally said. "You were in my garage Friday night. I have audio. Don't insult me by pretending." He paused again, then sighed like someone who had just been caught cheating on a test and realized there was no point in fighting it. "Look, man, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't plan any of it. I don't care about your excuses. I'm not asking for an apology. So what do you want? I want you to stay away from my house. Don't call her. Don't text her. Don't show up at another barbecue, birthday, or neighborhood thing. You disappear. That's not going to work. She's not just going to stop talking to me. She will, once she sees what I have." There was a long pause before he said, "You recorded us?" "I recorded enough." He didn't say anything else. Just hung up. I stood in the backyard for a few more minutes, watching the clouds shift above the roofline, not feeling anything in particular. No satisfaction. No rage. Just a quiet certainty that I was done pretending. Nicole was still inside, probably folding laundry or texting him again. But not for long. The next time we talked, she wouldn't be able to lie her way out. Not with what I had. Not with what I was about to do. It wasn't the kind of conversation you planned for. I didn't rehearse it in my head or write anything down. When I walked into the kitchen that night and saw her sitting at the table scrolling through her phone, I knew it was time. I'd been carrying the truth long enough, and I didn't care if she screamed, cried, denied everything, or begged. I just wanted to look her in the face and say it out loud. She glanced up and asked if I wanted to order takeout or if she should cook something. I said neither. She put her phone down slowly and tilted her head like she didn't understand. "We need to talk," I said, pulling out the chair across from her. I sat down and didn't look away. She gave a nervous laugh. "Okay, you sound serious. I know what you've been doing." She blinked a few times and tried to smile again, but it was thinner now. "What do you mean?" "I know about Jeff. I know what's been going on in the garage. I know what you did last Friday." Her mouth parted slightly, and for a second I thought she might try to deny it. She didn't. Not immediately. "What are you talking about?" I recorded everything. There was no shock in her eyes. Just a quiet flicker of realization that the game was over. She swallowed hard and looked away, staring down at her fingers like they could help her come up with the right words. "How long have you known?" she asked, still not looking at me. "Long enough." She nodded slowly and leaned back in the chair, arms crossed over her chest. No tears, no collapse, just this blank expression like she had been waiting for this moment and was trying to hold it together. "It didn't mean anything," she said finally. "That's the best you've got." "I'm not making excuses. I don't even know why I did it. It wasn't planned. You lied to me. You used your friend as an alibi. You went behind my back with someone we both know. That's not something that just happens." She stayed silent, and I didn't fill the space. I wanted her to sit in it. "I've been watching you lie for weeks," I continued. "I waited to see if you'd come clean. You didn't. You acted like everything was normal, like I was stupid. I didn't want to hurt you. Then you shouldn't have done it." She sighed and leaned forward, elbows on the table, her voice quieter now. "I haven't been happy, Brandon. That doesn't give you permission to blow up our life." "I didn't blow it up. We've been drifting for a while. You've been distant, quiet, closed off. Because I knew something was wrong. I was trying to figure it out. You stopped talking to me. Because I didn't want to say something I couldn't take back." We stared at each other for a long time. She looked tired, like someone who had run out of ways to spin the truth. I felt nothing. No rage, no sadness, just the final clarity that I was done trying. "So what now?" she asked, her voice low. "I'm moving out. You can stay here. I don't want to live in this house with you anymore." She nodded, but I could see the panic creeping in behind her eyes. "So that's it. I'm not filing yet. But I want space. I need to get out before I start hating you. I don't want to lose you. You already lost me." She looked down again, like she didn't know how to argue with that. "Are you going to tell anyone?" she asked. "I don't have to. Jeff knows I recorded everything. He won't be showing up here again." She flinched slightly at that, like the mention of his name stung more than anything else I had said. "You're really leaving?" "Yeah. Tonight." "No. I'll be gone by the end of the week." She nodded again, not crying, not begging, just nodding like she was trying to make sense of a decision that had already been made. "I'm sorry, Brandon." "I know." We sat there in silence for a few more minutes before I got up, pushed the chair back in, and walked upstairs. She didn't follow me. I packed a small bag with enough clothes for a few days and left it by the front door. I didn't want to stay in that room with her anymore. That night, I slept on the couch and didn't say a word when she passed by me on her way to bed. The next morning, we didn't speak. She made coffee. I drank mine outside. It was like we were strangers living in the same space, and honestly, it felt better than pretending we were still something we weren't. By Wednesday, I had a place lined up. Just a small one-bedroom apartment 10 minutes from work, nothing special. The kind of place that was meant for starting over, not staying forever. I didn't take much with me, some clothes, my laptop, a few boxes of personal stuff. I left everything else in the house, not because I didn't want it, but because I didn't want to drag the past into my next space. She was still moving around the house like she wasn't sure if she should say something or stay quiet. I guess she thought there was still a chance we'd talk it through, maybe go to counseling, maybe put the whole thing in a box and forget it ever happened. But she never said that out loud. She just hovered, waiting for me to offer her a script she could read from. I didn't. The morning I left, she stood in the doorway while I zipped up the last bag. Her arms were crossed, and she was trying hard not to look like she was about to say something important. I didn't rush. I zipped the bag, lifted it, and walked it to the front door. She followed a few steps behind, not speaking. When I opened the door, she finally did. "Do you hate me?" she asked, her voice low. I didn't answer right away. I stood there with my hand on the doorknob, trying to figure out what I actually felt. "No," I said, "but I don't trust you, and I don't want to keep pretending I do. I never stopped loving you. That's not enough." She looked like she wanted to cry, but the tears weren't coming. Maybe she'd cried already. Maybe she didn't know how to anymore. She leaned against the doorframe, watching me, waiting for something else. "I don't know what to do now," she admitted. "You figure it out." "That's easy for you to say." "No, it's not. I'm walking away from something I gave everything to. That's not easy. But I can't keep being the only one trying." "Are you going to come back?" "Not unless something changes." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not making plans around someone who made a choice to lie and kept lying." She looked down at the floor and nodded like she had accepted it, but I wasn't sure if she really had. I stepped outside, pulled the door shut behind me, and didn't look back. I didn't need to. I'd seen enough. The drive to the apartment was quiet, and I didn't play music or call anyone. I just drove, thinking about everything that had happened over the past few weeks. I thought I'd feel relief when I finally left, but it wasn't that simple. There was relief, yeah, but it was mixed with a strange emptiness that didn't feel good or bad. It just was. The new place was quiet. No one had lived there in a while. The carpet smelled like cleaning solution, and the walls were all off-white. I dropped the bags, opened a window, and sat on the edge of the bed for a while, listening to the distant traffic outside. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was just done. A few days later, Lisa texted me asking how I was holding up. I told her I was all right. She said Nicole hadn't reached out to her. I said I wasn't surprised. She said she hoped I wasn't regretting anything. "I don't regret anything," I replied. "I regret what she did, but not how I handled it." That night, I went for a walk through the neighborhood near the apartment. It was quiet, mostly young couples and older people. No one knew me here. No one looked at me like a guy who got cheated on. I was just another man trying to figure things out. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to anyone. A week later, Nicole called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail saying she was thinking about me, asking if I was okay, saying she missed me. I deleted it. 2 days after that, she emailed me a photo of a note I once left her years ago, something dumb I wrote on a napkin during a vacation. I didn't reply. She was doing what people do when they realize they've pushed too far, reaching backwards instead of looking at what they actually broke. That wasn't my job anymore. One night, I sat in the apartment, drinking a beer alone, and realized I hadn't thought about Jeff in days. He used to be the center of my anger, but now he was nothing. Just another weak person who got in over his head and thought he'd get away with it. Nicole had done the real damage. She let someone into the space we built, not just physically, but emotionally. And she did it with the calmness of someone who thought she'd never get caught. That was the part one couldn't forgive. People asked me if I'd ever take her back. The answer stayed the same. Not unless I believed she actually wanted to fix what she broke and not just go back to the routine. But she never showed that. She just wanted to stop the bleeding, not treat the wound. Eventually, I stopped checking her socials. I stopped thinking about what she might be doing or if Jeff was still around. It didn't matter anymore. That life was done. I wasn't angry. I wasn't waiting. I was just moving forward, even if I didn't know where I was going next. The betrayal didn't define me, but how I handled it did. And that's what I carried with me, nothing else.